place to start this video.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome to the October Arcadia Book Club discussion of Persepolis, a banned book, and also our very first graphic novel. So, has anybody read graphic novels before?
No.
Kate and Terry.
Yeah, I've read a lot, but
I made a point of reading the one genderqueer that was the most banned book of the year, just because, of course, we've got to see what that's all about.
right.
There are so many good ones. The George Takei about when he was in a Japanese internment camp, and
Yeah.
Ross Chast. Those are great Linda Berries. So if you like this kind of format, there are some other really great books to try out.
Well, and the one that I wrote about last year and talked about forever, Ducks, which is about this Canadian woman from the Maritime provinces who, when she was younger, worked for 2 years in the oil fields of northern Alberta. It's an amazing book, absolutely amazing book. So I encourage you to pick it up. Although it hasn't come out in paperback yet. It's quite hefty, but it goes obviously very quickly. Excuse me, I haven't eaten all day, so I'm going to eat an apple while we're talking. Wait, who was the birthday? Oh, Terry, that's right.
Who looked old?
Happy birthday, Terry.
Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I should have brought treats.
Yeah, you did.
My mom used to make pumpkin cookies to bring to school because my birthday was so close to Halloween.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
My God, I can't. Did my mother ever bake anything for my birthday? What a joke. Of course not. I was the fourth kid. She couldn't care. She didn't even know where I was most of the time.
Are you telling, was this an American banned book? I thought it was banned book, somewhere else, but in this country?
Yeah.
Why?
Who knows?
That's stunning. I mean, I believe it was banned in
Iran.
Japan or, or somewhere, but I just don't see it. Well,
It was Texas.
hard to understand. Yeah, Texas would probably be top on my list too. Yeah.
The Bible is the only non-banned book in Texas.
How recently was it banned in the US?
Let me look that up.
That's a good question, because I remember, when it came out 20 years ago, and I remember reading it right when it came out, and then the next year she did Persepolis 2, which I bought and read right away. But yeah, I just think it's that, I don't know it's a good question, Al, what it is that would prompt people to ban it. But maybe, you don't want to encourage independent thinking among young women. I don't know.
Oh, no. It was the Chicago Public Schools.
Yes. It's about time my city did something right.
How odd.
Yeah, it doesn't say why. It just says it was in 2015.
Well, my
2015. Wow.
Yeah, my son's actually the copy that I have is my son's from his school. But he goes to a school where I think they may read nothing but banned books.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me see that cover, because this is the cover I have. Let me see.
Oh, I think this one's complete. It's probably I didn't when you just said that you just read the first one.
Yeah.
I think I overread.
Oh, no, that's good too, because the second half of the story is really pretty amazing too. It's just good. Well, speaking of Florida and Texas, I went to the PEN America site today. 40% of all books banned in this past year were in Florida districts, and there were 1,406 banned attempts at banning in Florida, 625 in Texas, 333 in Missouri, 281 in Utah, and 186 in Pennsylvania. That's the five most important. And in 22-23, there were 3,362 instances of book banning, which was an increase of 33% over the previous year. So that's pretty startling. But, I think I don't know, I'm sure you've followed all this stuff, but, there are these kind of national groups that send people, how to argue about certain books and how to go into your school board meeting and what you need to say, and all of the buzzwords like porn in schools and sexually explicit and age inappropriate. And these people go to these meetings and 3/4 of them haven't read the books, but they've been given their talking points, and then it puts pressure on the school boards, which then, because if they don't act, and there's the state law, for instance, punitive law, then teachers could get fired, librarians can get people. We're living in a kind of book terror right now. It's a really, really complicated and disturbing time. Oh, on many levels.
Yeah, to put it mildly, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's teaching high school English in Florida now, and she's obviously been, like, for the last year has been sending out her resume. And we were in an artist residency group together, and she did great cyanotypes that then she posted all over in Florida that like kind of juxtaposed some of her lesson plans with pages from the banned books, and they were really beautiful. And I think that probably no one understood them, but we all felt great about supporting her. I think she just felt like she had no voice to say anything as a teacher, that she wasn't safe to to speak up. So that was her little act of revolution, like Marjane's all throughout. Did everybody love the beginning when she's marching the little militant? I just thought it was so awesome. And this is a dumb question, but I don't know, does anybody know, if you write a graphic novel, do the authors always illustrate it themselves? Do you have to be no? Okay.
No. Although some do, obviously, but you don't have to. No. It's like children's books.
Yeah.
It's you find someone who understands your sensibility, and then they draw it for you.
She did, right? She did these.
Yeah, she drew this. Did anybody know Larry was, who taught for 30 years, he's seeing a play tonight. A play, really, Larry? As is Diane. It's even worse. Diane's seeing some cheese bag musical. So I don't know what that's about, but I don't get it.
Careful here, James. I ran into Larry last night, and he said, "Yeah, I'm not going to be at book club tonight because he's seen Aladdin."
He's seeing
Aladdin.
He's seeing Aladdin.
Aladdin.
He is seeing a boy. He's going to hear from me next month. I'll tell you.
Give him crap about that.
Yeah, don't worry. That's a built-in. Wow, Aladdin. Good choice, Larry. That's probably been banned somewhere, I would think, because that's a whole nother thing. The high school theater stuff that people banning, or people trying to do a play that's even remotely provocative, and get into huge trouble. Wow, that's unbelievable.
I was going to say, last week I happened to be up in Sturgeon Bay just for the day, and I stopped at Novel Bay Books, and I was talking not with the bookseller, one of her staff there, and I hadn't yet started our book, right? But we're talking about book clubs, and of course I talked about you guys, and I said, yeah, we have this great virtual book club. And I said, I read books I never would have chosen. And I said, I'm reading this. Well, it turns out this woman, I think she used to be an English teacher, and I think maybe Green Bay. I'm not sure, but she said, oh yeah, I taught that book every year. So
Wow.
now that I've read it, you can bet next time I'm in the store and she's in the store, we're going to have big discussions, because I am so interested to hear how it went with the students, and how it couldn't have been that long ago based on, I'm guessing, her age. But yeah, I would love to have discussed it with her, but I didn't know enough to discuss it.
Wow. And that was in Green. You think she teaches in Green Bay?
I think she was teaching in Green Bay. I can't say for sure, but she did that and then wasn't doing that position anymore and had some position with the state, maybe the Department of Education or something. So pretty knowledgeable. And we were talking about other books too. Oh, of course, I talked about Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, you know. Oh, every book I listed she had read.
Wow.
So, and she loves your store. She's like, oh yeah, I've been there. I love that store.
Yeah.
And did she ever have any problem when she taught it? Did she say?
Oh, you know, that's just the problem, James. I didn't know enough to really talk about it with her.
Yeah.
You know, now that I've read it, yeah, I'd like to hear, did she have any problems, or where there, how did she handle certain parts of the book with the students?
Yeah.
You know, a few sections in there.
Well, and I mean, for instance, I'm just thinking about things that could offend parents or be upset. I mean, I think the way she handles what she learns as a young girl, you know, about the violence and about the sexual violence and about, I mean, it's always presented in a way that, you know, she's hearing it from her parents, so she's in a place of trust, and she can take information in and have a way to contextualize it. So it feels so safe in a way, even though it's horrifying, that to me, it's a kind of, it stands as a kind of shining example of how to let your child be aware of the society that you're in and what's going on with it, and participate even. I mean, you know, they eventually let her go to demonstrations, and when her mother didn't think she should go to a demonstration, she goes home and she slaps both the daughter and the young helper. And I love that drawing with the shadow of the hands on both of their cheeks is so potent. God, I just thought she did a really inventive way of dealing with an extremely complicated and disorienting subject.
The frame that stuck with me like that was after her uncle Anush came and revealed a lot of things, to kind of told her his whole story, and she was just laying there in bed, and when he was finished talking, there's just the graphic of her just laying in bed, just, you know, kind of overwhelmed, flattened. You can just see that she's
she was almost, she looked two-dimensional.
Right.
Wow.
Well, so this is my first graphic novel ever. I think the closest thing I came to something like this was comic books when I was a kid, but my attitude toward these has always been, it's hard enough to get kids reading or interested, so let them read whatever they want to, and if it's a graphic novel, that's great. But I was surprised how much emotion she got through in just a few words, being able to put those pictures with them. And it was really quite stunning to me, the way that, you know, so much of what she was feeling came through. And it's, you know, pretty shallow on the dialogue, but when you see the picture that goes with it, you're kind of really tuning into what she's emotionally talking about. And I thought it was it was great. It was a really good experience. So I'm going to have to rethink my graphic novel prejudices, I guess.
Well, isn't that funny? I mean, let's talk about that. That's a very perceptive comment, Al, and the fact that, you know, because we all read comic books when we were a kid, you know, and that was one very active way of learning how stories work. So it is funny that so many of us sort of start into graphic novels thinking, oh, this is going to be stupid, you know, or why am I wasting my time? But I mean, that combination of the spare dialogue and the, you know, the apt drawing is just so potent, and it can be done so simply, and it's a very effective tool. But why do you think why do we, having grown up, you know, reading comic books, why do we have a prejudice against graphic novels? I mean, I don't know, because I was very slow to come to them too.
I think people who like to read like words, and so you feel like you're going to get less words, maybe, you know, you won't get the same vocabulary.
Right. Okay. That's
Yeah, for me, it was just, I never expected anything of any depth out of a graphic novel, because of, you know, earlier experiences. But I sort of got the idea it was more, I don't know what I thought of it. I just thought I would rather read a regular book than give even this a chance. So once again, I'm glad a book club that twisted my arm until I had to actually read one. So yeah, it was good. The other thing I thought.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The other thing I was thinking is, I'm glad I didn't have any daughters, because oh my God, this woman would have drove me bananas with worry when I was, the things she did to her teachers and with her teachers, and the marches and everything. I would just have been a basket case. And my brother had two, so, and he said, you wouldn't believe it. I'm not even going to tell you what this is like. So, but it was kind of eye-opening that way too, to see her so aggressive, and to see her aggressive and still so innocent, and not realizing what she was putting on the line when she did some of this stuff, and just thinking, well, you know, my parents say don't do it, so I'm going to do it, and we'll see, you know, what happens. And
right.
Wow.
Al, I'm with you too, because I had never read a graphic novel. I don't even know if I opened this one up before. You know, in my mind, I'm either thinking Peanuts or Archie and Veronica, you know, that type of thing. But I can't believe how much I got out. You said there aren't a whole lot of words, but the drawing, you know, how much, as I think, Terry, you were saying, that one where she's just looking up at the sky, you know, not the sky, the ceiling. And then I'm looking at page 25, and I don't, you know, it's this one, you know, like the artist, you know, with the half face, right?
Well,
She's like, I want to go take a bath. And the bewilderment, and, you know, just the drawings do so much. I did not expect that at all. And it makes me want to learn or talk more with people who maybe draw graphic novels, and hear just the whole, I don't know how they do it. Because I was trying to explain to my husband, he hasn't looked at the book, but I said, the pictures themselves tell so much.
right.
You know, not just the words. And again, like you're saying, Al, I never would have picked up the book.
The next time you're in the store, each of you just go to the graphic novel shelf and just take one or two off. And I mean, I think you'll be surprised all the time. And, you know, there's some of them, as Nancy was saying, that are extremely funny or droll. And we, you know, you need that too. And then there's someone like Chris Ware, who's one of my favorite storytellers, but he does a huge amount of his stuff has almost no language. where you're just, you're just building through the, and you're creating the story as you're, and then somebody will say something and you'll realize, oh yeah, gosh, there's been 14 panels and no one said a word. But, but the story's just being told so precisely and so beautifully and so simply that, yeah, there's really, if I was up in Wisconsin, I'd show you the thing that he did for Independent Bookstore Day about 8 years ago. It's a sheet about this, maybe 14 inches tall and 8 inches wide. And it's just the story of a woman who's you watch how her behavior, there's not a single word in this, and there's probably 25 drawings, not a single word, but you watch how her daughter becomes a reader by watching her mother. And so the very last image is the mother sitting in her chair reading and this 8-year-old sitting on the couch reading. And it's just so beautifully constructed where you can see, yeah, okay, I see, yeah, wow. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's a great form, and I'm embarrassed that I haven't read many more. I do have, oh, wait, hold it. Nobody move.
Hey, Kate, do you read many graphic novels?
I did in college because I went to school in Chicago, which is a pretty big, obviously James knows, a pretty big graphic novel town. Like, I think the Chicago Public Library has possibly maybe like a special collection
I think they,
that's
yeah,
just like half a floor almost of graphic novels.
yeah.
Wow.
I was trying to think while everyone was talking, like which ones I've enjoyed the most. I've got the worst memory for stuff I've read. But I do like Chris Ware a lot. And there was one called Habibi, which is like this thick. And I don't really remember the story that well, but obviously location wise, it's in the same part of the world as Persepolis. And the art is some of the most gorgeous art I've ever seen. Even just the cover, like you could just frame that and you'd be good. If I think of any before this call is over, I'll type it out though.
Yeah. So here's Ducks. As you can see, it's quite thick. When I wrote about it, we showed a couple of the pages. But if you can, this is how she draws. She's a famous comic. I mean, she published 2 books before of very, very funny sort of skewering of history. But her name is Kate Beaton, and she grew up on Nova Scotia. And it's really quite a remarkable book. And then this guy, Seth, you've probably, I don't know what happened. Kate went away, it looks like, but Seth is one of the guys who everybody loves, and his things are quite complicated, but his drawings are very, very clear and specific, and they tell a huge story, even if there was no language. But yeah, I mean, I wish I had more. I have a bunch of others in Wisconsin, but I can't encourage you. I mean, Ducks is just a story that will live with you, like Persepolis to me. I mean, it's just such a potent story, told by I mean, she went to the oil sands because she wanted to pay off her college loans right away. And that's where all the money, all the good jobs in Canada were in the oil sands. And so she went out there when she was 21. And the ratio of men to women in the oil sands was at that point this was 2005. The ratio of men to women was 50 men to one woman. Most of them were young girls. So you can imagine some of the problems. And she writes really, really beautifully and strongly about all of that. But I think that, going back to Persepolis, just the way that she builds her parents and her parents' friends changing perceptions of what's really going on. I think, and the time she takes to let those things happen it just makes the story, you just really do feel, even though she obviously wrote it 20 years after this happened to her, but you really feel like you're being told this story by a 12-year-old. I mean, she really tapped into her younger self, I think, in a really moving way. I don't know.
I'm not, I've only read, sorry for being late. I had only read one or two other graphic novels, but when I first opened this up, I knew it was going to be serious, because it's very, she has drawn it very dark. I mean, each panel has a lot of black in it. And there's even one panel when she learns her friend's house has been bombed. It's just totally black. So I that was my heads up. A lot of the other graphic novels I've read were a little bit more like what you have just shown, lots of words. But when I saw that this was very graphic and very dark, I knew this was going to be a serious thing. But I enjoyed it very much. There were parts of it that it was hard to pick up and read. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew kind of what was going to happen, and it was hard to hear that, especially about the torture and being stopped in the demonstrations, and she talked her way out of it and from being arrested. So yeah, I thought it was an amazing graphic novel. Thanks for choosing it.
Wow. Yeah, that black box that you mentioned is, and then the words underneath it, no scream in the world could have relieved my suffering and my anger. And yeah, it's just, and then she builds those 3 panels. The first panel is with the girl with her hand over her mouth.
Yeah.
And then she puts, so both of those are such universal gestures of despair. And then she realizes, well, there's no way I can give this, to try to write a scream that would encompass what she must have felt. It's such a beautiful choice to just do the black box.
Yeah, and that the print underneath it was small.
Tiny, yeah. Wow. And we're all old enough, or most of us, except for Kate, to have experienced all that stuff when it was, happening. I mean, Nancy's the exact same age as Marjane Satrapi, so it's just, I mean, it's all so vivid, and she makes it come home. And it's always, of course, humbling and important to hear the stories of those things from the people who lived it. I mean, we basically heard it in the voice of Ted Koppel. I mean, with Nightline, because I mean that crisis created Nightline, and you were just glued to that thing every night. Terry,
I was just going to say that I read it, and then when the movie came out, I saw it because my best friend, my oldest son, who's 26, his best friend, we met in the park when they were infants, and she's Iranian, and she's the same age too as Marjane Satrapi. And as soon as it was published, she gave it to me, and she said, "This is my life." And she, she talked about, and I thought that what Marjane did was so beautiful, because Homa talked about that these wars are going on and history's being made, and she was a 13-year-old girl who, when Iraq was dropping bombs on them in the middle of the night, was too tired to get up, and her mother pulling her out of bed. We have to go downstairs. I don't care. I'm too tired. Just imagining. And she just also talked about the first days that they came back with having to wear the veil. And the one other thing that I thought was really interesting was the way that young Marjane was so intrigued with hero stories. And in Homa's son, my best friend's son, Sorab, second grade at Chicago City Day School, came dressed for Halloween as Che Guevara. And he was like the only 7-year-old dressed as Che. And I think there is so much respect for revolutionaries, and so it's just really interesting to see it, to see somebody who's had lived in America. She's back in Tehran now, but and see what is really her life story told like that.
What does she say about Tehran now?
She says that, it was so sad because she was so very energized, like I think Marjane Satrapi was as well, with the activities that followed Masa Amini's murder.
Right.
That it felt different but I heard Homa said this, and then I heard Marjane say this too, that it feels different this time. They kind of like always this hope that maybe this will be the tipping point. And they both said that, in 79, only 40% of the population was literate, but now it's like 80%, and they thought that might make a difference. But it seems that things get pushed underground again, and in that artist residency I was telling you about, there was a gentleman who was from Tehran, and he had done a whole graphic novel on Iran and the next like superhero that was going to save them. But then he juxtaposed it with some actual photographs that he'd taken of people living in graves, and just how the public square isn't gone, but it's driven underground into homes. And Homa's cousins, when they visited here, they laughed about being that Tarane was jailed, and I think they just developed a different mindset that they weren't going to be oppressed by it, and they were still going to live their lives. And I think that the rich culture and the artistic life there, that's why that's still strong. So she was hopeful, but it's not, it doesn't look like though. And in fact, she said she came and visited this summer, and she showed me on her phone, she got she'll get texts that say, you were seen here on your Vespa without your hijab, and they're tracking that. And but she's like the remarkable, in fact, that was something that she said in the book too, that that the ability to just let things go over them like waves is something that has always been so remarkable to me about Homa and her family. And I guess maybe that you don't have a choice if you really want to try to enjoy all that life could offer you. But it is remarkable how they managed to live and find in so much beauty, and within the constraints of what the facts of their lives are.
Why did she go back?
Her parents her husband died, and
that's right, I remember.
And then her parents, who were in their late 80s, were still there, and her father since died, and now her mother's there, and she lives on the street that her mother lives on. And there's also, she went back, and she's an architect, she practiced architecture there. Her cousins have hotels, and and her uncle has an art gallery. They have these rich but weirdly underground lives. but the economy and the sanctions really have made a dramatic difference in how people are living, and I can't even imagine. And it is one place that just from everything she's told me and shown me over the years that I would so desperately love to go to see her home. This, you know, this friend that I love so much, but like with the human rights work that I've done, my husband's like that. I would never say what you could or couldn't do, but that is one place I say you just couldn't go. It wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree with Dave. He's right.
Well, and Terry, what you're talking about is exactly what, you know, was going on in the book. You know, what's the main character's name? The little girl? Oh, you know, the girl in the book.
Marjane,
Well, anyway,
yeah, but I don't know. Is she Miriam in the book? I can't remember.
They call her. It's Margie. So Margie, Marji, I think is how they usually refer to her.
But Margie, on the one hand, you know, that it's pretty conscripted about what they have to do, and yet they're having parties. You know, and she's wearing her blue jeans underneath, and you know, pretty much like your friend too. I mean, they still are trying to go about with this other life, but with this, I don't know, overhang on, you know, encompassing everything.
Right.
Wow.
Well, and I think that, you know, there's so many cultures, you know, all of Central Europe under the Russians in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s. I mean, everybody knew there were just two levels of life. There was a truth that the government created, and the truth that you knew was the truth. And everybody, that's just how you lived. And you had to be very, very mindful of what you said out loud. And, you know, this, I mean, because I've been for years, been fascinated by the way the Czechs dealt with all of that. And, you know, this back in the 70s, they had this stuff that was referred to as samidzat, where they mimeographed things and handed them to each other. I mean, back before there was any other way to get information from hand to hand to hand. But, you know, and in the last years of Ceausescu in Romania, every third person was an informer. And so that's the same with Iran. I mean, you know, a great sequence when her mother puts up the black coverings over the windows because she says, I don't want anybody looking in. The way we live, all it's going to take is somebody seeing us having a party in our house on a Thursday night with other people, and we'll all be arrested. And to go back to her, and then, sorry, I had another idea about her parents. I mean, how brave they were to get her out.
Oh,
you know, and to make it sound like, oh, this is going to be a big adventure for you, and it's going to be great, and we'll come soon. And then, you know, the daughter keeps, the more they talk, she lets you know, I don't think they're coming. But, you know, it was the most important decision. But how do you find the courage as parents to send your 13-year-old to Europe? And yeah, yes, Adele, did you? Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Yeah. Yeah, there's just so many moments in that where you think of, I mean, I was only a stepfather, but I have two daughters. And I just think, God, I don't know. How do people do it? It's pretty amazing.
It's like the parents in London putting their kids on the train and not knowing where they're going to go. My mom's cousin, that happened to him. And he was a big kid, so he was like the last one because they didn't want to feed a big kid. But yeah, they just, I don't know. I guess you're willing to take that gamble, but my God, I can't imagine sending my child off somewhere.
But
I think the boys were treated pretty badly too. I mean,
yeah.
When parents started sending their kids out of the country at age 12, because after 13 they couldn't, because they were essentially going to be cannon fodder for the army. By the way, that sort of matches how I think my family got to this country, because they were in Prussia, but they weren't Prussians. And it was the same thing. When the kids turned 13, you either started paying a really big tax every year to keep them out of the army, or they got drafted. So there was a big outflow of kids going to live with relatives in the United States. And I think that's how my grandparents got over here. But anyway, as an aside, the girls were, that how they were treated and the denial of an education and a chance to express themselves and all of that. You see that, but you don't see too much about the boys, except, when you were talking about the party, where she went to the party and then all the other boys were floating, being blown up and carrying their keys to go to that, that was pretty stunning too. Not a good time to be a child in Iran at that time.
And even as a child, she bought into that hero thing, that she thought her friends' fathers were such heroes and hers wasn't. He was, too reticent. And then there was just that really moving when her friend's father, they let all of the dissidents that had been jailed out of jail to fly bombing missions, and her friend's father was killed, and she went up to her in the schoolyard and said, he was a hero, and she said, I'd rather have him in jail and be alive.
Right. Yeah.
This book, reading it this past week, it was a even tougher read, and because of what's going on in the Mideast, and watching the news, and it was like giving sound effects to the book. It made books seem even more real, the horrific things, and then reading the drawings again. I was amazed by the artwork, but just horrific. It was hard to read.
But it is. But I agree. I mean, I agree with what you're all saying. But what Terry was talking about, the admiring homeless family, and I mean, these people kept living their lives and insisting on living their lives and insisting on being truthful with each other and not letting their daughter get sucked into all of the craziness. And so her, and you can just imagine how she would get to Vienna and start to see her father in a whole different way, start to realize that the choices he made were good ones, and and he wasn't a hero in the romantic sense, but he was probably a hero in a much deeper sense, in a much more lasting sense.
Why do you think they stayed? I mean, as things got worse and worse, I couldn't understand why the whole family stayed.
Yeah. That's a good, but it's some of that's explained in the second book.
Oh, okay.
I think that what happened, and I guess it was in the second book, but they talk about a lot of couples of a certain age, over the age of 40, that would emigrate. They could never get jobs anywhere commensurate with the education that they had, the formidable educations they had. And then there are these super educated people that are driving cabs or cleaning houses, or
he does make a reference
it's
to
only
that.
one reference to that in the first half. No, I mean, that's a very hard choice if you've been a doctor, or you end up doing all sorts of things that because you have to live. Wow. Gosh. I had a thought that I was going to throw out as a conversation starter, and it went out of my head. I should have written it down.
Has anybody else read The House of Sand and Fog?
Yeah.
That's a good explanation of what happened. So the father of the family had been part of the Shah's regime, and then when he came to the US, ended up like cleaning up the roadside. He's like a roadside worker, but he didn't tell his family that. He wore his uniform every day, and his military uniform. So yes, it's that that same idea where you could have had a big life and then you come to a new country and everything is the opposite.
That's a case with a lot of immigrants.
Yeah.
I remember when my grandmother was in her 90s and we were lucky to be able to have these women from Lithuania help her when she couldn't, she was to keep her in her home. And, you know, one was a patent lawyer and one of, you know, that they're leaving with it and what they're, you know, is just was interesting. And Homa always said when Trump was elected, she's while he was running, she kept saying, you know, Americans are so complacent. You just don't realize how quickly things can turn. And it was interesting, but also a little heartening that she just like reminded me that whatever happens, that you can get through it. And I think also to what Al was saying, that in some instances, it's still, you know, it's home. You know, those mountains are meaningful to their family, and they truly believe that there, you know, are certain areas and around that there's nowhere in the world this is beautiful. And if you still had family there, it would be hard.
Yeah, it'd be very hard. Oh, I remember, Al, one of the things I was going to say was, you know, back in Shakespeare's history plays, you know, the wealthy lords, you know, they just bought somebody to go fight for them.
Mercenary.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, not even mercenary. I mean, just poor people who would then take the place of, you know, a family, you know, of someone who with a connected family, and there's a chilling moment in Henry IV Part 1 where Hal's talking to Falstaff, and they're talking about these young recruits that are so terrible, you know, because they're just, you know, they're people who've been given 20 pounds to go fight in the war, and Falstaff just says, "Food for powder, Hal. Food for powder." You know, in other words, they're just there to waste the enemy's gun, you know, ammunition, and they give up their lives for that. You know, and it's that thing about those young boys, you know, it's just, you know, it's an economic decision in an odd way. Gosh. But Terry, I agree with you. I think somehow you just you hang on to hope, and you stay alive and aware and push back where you can and argue where you can, but you know, this is the hardest stretch that I can remember in our country. And I come from a family where I had a first cousin who was MIA in Vietnam for 17 years, and I was out in the streets protesting against it. So you can imagine that, you know, the tension of that. But it just, you know, you know, the country survived all of that. The country survived the Civil War. The country might survive Donald Trump. I don't know. Let's hope we do. And, you know, the way that things have, but discourse is the hardest thing. I mean, the way people are now, the harshness of what we say to each other, and it's just, I don't know.
The intractability of people's positions.
Yeah.
It is hard to understand.
It is. I agree. It is. Somebody better tell a joke. This is getting a little serious.
Well,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're going to read maybe the antidote to that. We're going to read next month. What You Are Looking For is in the library. So I don't know if you read James's newsletter a couple weeks ago, but this is
always.
Yes, this is a lovely story about people connecting in the right kind of way.
You know what it started to remind me of? I mean, it's a very sweet story. I mean, it's written in a very sort of tender way, and it's 5 linked stories, and each of the 5 protagonists in each story and has this same conversation with this librarian, this researcher. But it started to remind me almost of a big, complicated Robert Altman movie without maybe some of his cynicism. So because the lives kind of interact in all sorts of subtle little ways, and you start to think, wait, and then you realize, oh no, they're all living in the same small area of Tokyo. So it was, you start to just give in to the plausibility of, oh yeah, okay, be like living in a place larger than Spring Green, but confined, so that if you're looking for certain things, you're going to run into people. But it's just there's a kind of layers of life feeling to it that made me think of Robert Altman. And there's also the way that and I'm sure that people have been really praising this translator, but the way that she differentiates kind of cultural awareness and age and position in life, she really creates interesting, plausible voices. And then maybe the other thing, just pay attention as you go through it to how cleverly she teases out little bits of information about the librarian, so that by the end of the 5th part of the book, you feel like you really know this woman. And it's just, I mean, the fact that the book has the same structure over and over again, you're just waiting for the first moment when each of these 5 people see this woman, because she's quite large, and they each have a kind of almost terrifying moment where they want to run out of the room. She's that big. But the way that they each describe it to themselves is so apt. And then they, somehow the woman looks at them and it makes them come towards her. And then, of course, she becomes, in a very indirect way, and she keeps reminding them, I'm not doing this, you're doing that. You're saving your own life. I'm not doing anything. I'm just offering you a book. Oh, that's another thing. This crazy, Sam Bankman-Fried, who's on trial right now, and had just read Michael Lewis's insane book. That guy hates books.
Well, that explains everything.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, he's really an amazing, fascinating character, but he really does not like books. He thinks books are just insanely stupid because they're so long. Just give me the bullet points that are in the book and I'm fine, because he's one of those, as someone who's now 75, and I can remember maybe 4 times in my life when I could actually say to myself, I'm bored. This guy is bored every 50 seconds because his brain just operates so quickly, and he's very, very, very smart. And I read a hilarious thing yesterday, or one of the times I've been reading it, because once I started reading the book, I started reading about the trial a lot more. But his lawyer told Michael Lewis that the thing that's really upsetting him about being in jail is that he can only be on the internet about 4 hours a day.
Oh my.
And he's the most unusual, if this is real, if this is the real guy, and this isn't a very, very elaborate pose of a life, he's really the most unusual and unconnected to almost the way any of us live that I've ever really read about.
And did you read the Walter Isaacson Elon Musk book yet?
No, I'm so appalled by Elon Musk that I can't do it.
I know, but I just thought he might be similarly out of touch, disconnected.
Yeah. Well, but see, Elon Musk is the opposite of Sam Bankman-Fried.
SBF.
Yeah, because he started out, he has no interest in money.
Right.
He wanted to make money so that he could give it all
do
away.
Things with it, right?
Yeah, and of course, that maybe changed a little, but I mean, that was one of the first things that Michael Lewis couldn't get over, was this kid was, you know, when he met him, you know, it was FTX was at the height of its power, you know, and its earnings. And he was only interested in making money so he could give it all away.
Yeah, my husband was just saying that he read this was like the first time that Michael Lewis sort of gave a lot of leeway to people are suggesting that he kind of got too close with the subject, or it wasn't objective about him.
Oh, I think he's objective, but he gets close to all of the people he writes about.
But he seems to be able to judge them better.
I think people, to be honest, I think people just made up their, especially, you know, the people in the crypto world, the moment this thing went south, the people just decided, you know, throw him in jail and let's never see him again. And I think that it's just that Michael Lewis ends the book by saying, well, you know, it's a little bit like, this is a horrible example, but remember Ted Bundy? You know, the horrible guy who killed all those women. But think about how long they never had absolute concrete proof that he, you know, it took him to about 20th time before he made a big enough mistake so that they could actually convict him. Otherwise, it was just circumstantial evidence. And Michael Lewis is, yeah, that's all. Michael Lewis is just saying, I think there's a chance this kid is exactly who he says he is. And he was caught, he was careless. He was careless with other people's money. He was incredibly careless with his own money. He tried to do a business without doing any of the constraints, which is frankly the whole crypto world. And I think Michael Lewis is just able to say, and yeah, he probably did get too close to him, but I don't think it's much different from a lot of the other books of his that I've read. That that's part of his energy, is he just loves these people. By the way, the book is dedicated to his daughter, who was killed in a car accident with her boyfriend 3 years ago. And he says in an interview that I read that he enjoyed writing again. He didn't think he'd be able to enjoy writing again, but that this energy of all these people that he met, and he feels, I think, badly for all of them, and probably including Sam, but it brought him back to life, you know, to the joy. And he's a big laugher, you know. I mean, people tell stories about him, you know, sitting in various books, just giggling while he's making notes, because, you know, he's just a very light person. But the book is, and I'm not saying you should go out and buy the book, but the book it's a very, very fascinating study of a human being. And boy, these, you know, and they were all so young. I mean, my God, they're all under 30, and I don't know how anybody kept their head with the kind of money that was going around, you know. I mean, people were saying, you know, when Lewis met him, that SBF was going to be the first world trillionaire, you know. Wow. 2 years later, he's going to only have 40 hours of the internet in jail.
Does Lewis say, did his friend invest money? Did he lose his money?
Oh, I don't know if he lost his money, but the friend who is exposed, and people know who it is. Did you put a link to that? I didn't even look at the newsletter. Oh, good, because in that article in the Guardian, it tells who it was. But it's yeah, he did invest, but I don't know what he lost, or if he lost or not. But if you stayed in a long time, you lost, I think. And a long time meaning, you know, 18 months. It's they see the world a little quicker than we do. Anyway.
I just wanted to tell everybody that I just happened to listen to yesterday a podcast, an Ezra Klein podcast, I think it was the most recent one, where he has a guest interviewer interview the president of the American Library Association. And she is a queer woman from, I think, a small town somewhere. But when she first was elected, I think it's an elected position, got the job, she tweeted when it was still Twitter, to think that a lesbian Marxist something else is the head of the American Library Association. And then immediately there was all the censorship we talked about earlier. There was just all kinds of pushback and everybody saying she should be pulled. And it was just very interesting to listen to her. She said, of course, I wish I didn't do this. She said it was an excited utterance. And, if I could take it back, I would, because it just was such a distraction. But she had some really interesting things to say about what she thinks libraries should do, and who they're for, and representation of all kinds of groups. And she even was talking about, because the reason I think she was from a small town, and she had like a single mom, that she talked about how it was really a big deal for her mother to save up money to rent a carpet cleaner. And now libraries they're now libraries of things, in addition to libraries of books, that are sort of equalizing things. That there's a library near her that also, like, you can get passes to the museums in Chicago. They have a carpet cleaner. And she was just saying that would have been like life-changing for her mother. It was just very interesting. There's part of me is like, oh, that might be overreaching what libraries should do. But then I do think that there's an equalized, just an access function that they're a great vehicle for that. So it was an interesting interview. And Ezra Klein.
Good. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, I've read about that woman, but I've never heard her voice. Never. Huh.
I liked listening to her.
Yeah. Anything
know.
else?
Librarians have been sort of like, I worked with them my whole professional life, and they've always worried about this stuff in the background. And now I think the real professionalism of them is coming out when they have to deal with community situations and decide what goes into a library and what doesn't. And I'm still connected with some library board members who go through this periodically, and it's they're earning their money. And it isn't, it's not the, not the career you would pick to get rich, but it's rewarding in many, many ways, but they are really getting their backs pushed to the wall on a lot of stuff now. Usually it was just funny because they couldn't get the funding to do what they want to do. But now it's this whole idea that, maybe if you're going to have that book in your library, you shouldn't have a library, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
Right.
That's where we're headed. I know. It's horrible. Jeez.
All right. Well, next month, we're going to celebrate librarians on November 15th.
good for us. Good.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey now.
Thank you all.
Everybody.
Thanks for letting me eat.
Bye.